Welcome to the Bite Size Fitness Show, where we talk all things fitness, nutrition, and habits, and break them down into smaller, more digestible, bite-sized pieces of content for you to enjoy. My name is Sean Bleikerk, and I am your host, and in today's episode, I'm going to be answering the question, does eating less make you gain weight? So this might seem very obvious, and it is, right? Eating less does not make you gain weight, but it's not so simple. It's actually a little bit complicated. So let's start there. Anytime you reduce your calorie intake, you will subsequently lose weight eventually if that calorie restriction is big enough. The exception here is if there is also a drastic decrease in your movement, which can happen, but that's pretty rare. Meaning, if you eat less, eventually what's going to happen is you will lose weight, not gain weight. So the perfect example, the easiest example to look at this is if you were to examine some developing countries that still struggle with starvation, the obesity rate is pretty much at zero, right? And there was a very famous but controversial experiment done back, I believe, in the 40s called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. They got a group of healthy men, so normal body weight, and the goal was to reduce their body weight by 25%. And the purpose of the study was more psychological, to see what the psychological implications of starvation would do, but also it illustrates what happens when you reduce someone's calorie intake significantly and increase someone's calorie expenditure. So they got these participants to go from an average of, I believe, just over 3,000 calories per day to around 1,500 calories per day. And they did this gradually. And then they gradually brought it back up again. And they wanted to see what happened psychologically. So while we're not going to talk about the psychological part, what we will talk about is how every single person in that experiment did lose weight. So once again, the goal was to get them to drop 25% of their body weight. The interesting thing is there was some individual variability. So some people lost that weight quicker and easier. And for other people, that meant more of a steeper calorie deficit and more energy expended to get to that point. But while you restricted calories significantly and increased energy expenditure, every single person lost weight. So the laws of thermodynamics do not lie. Now, if you want to see the negative implications of what it does to you psychologically to do that, you can check out the paper because there are some pretty sobering findings there. But every single person that went on this restriction lost that weight, even though there was variability. So it's not just a binary thing. Everyone's going to experience that differently. Some people lose it faster and easier than others, but everyone is still subject to the rule of being in a calorie deficit and losing weight. Now, what happens if you lose weight fast and aggressively is, in a way we're lucky, in a way we're not lucky, but our metabolism is very adaptive. So our metabolism will find a way to mirror what we're doing with regards to our eating and movement. So if we're moving more and eating less, our body starts to panic and our metabolism will actually decrease. It's a concept called metabolic adaptation. So what they found during this experiment was, although people were losing weight at a very fast rate, their metabolic rate, so their metabolism, subsequently slowed down with that weight loss as a protective measure. One of the most famous examples of this is the Biggest Loser experiment. Most of you are probably familiar with the show The Biggest Loser, where they put them through a really aggressive diet and fitness program. And the goal is just to lose as much weight as possible. And as you can expect, everyone loses weight, and usually it's a ton of weight. Now, what happened when they followed up 6 years down the road, they found that everyone except one of the participants, I believe out of 14, could be wrong, but out of 14 or so, everyone but one had actually regained that weight back. But the biggest takeaway there is it's not just that the weight was gained back, but their metabolism was slower or lower than when it first started. So even though, let's assume, their weight is the same as when they started before the challenge, their metabolism actually is slower. So because they lost weight and gained it back, their metabolic rate was lower then at the highest point than it was at the highest point before starting the challenge. So once again, that's just a consequence of metabolic adaptation, and it's another warning sign why you don't want to lose weight really fast, really aggressively by cutting calories at a scary point like that. So There are a lot of people, and for some reason, this is the number that always gets tossed out, that claim they're eating 1,200 calories, but they're either maintaining their weight or they're gaining fat. And they want to know, like, is this possible? Why is it happening? So technically it is possible, and this would only be possible if they're doing exactly what these people similar to The Biggest Loser or the starvation experiment are doing, where they're severely cutting their calories and do it for a long period of time. And what ends up happening is, as you lose weight, your metabolism goes down, and eventually you get to a point where you can't cut calories anymore. Your metabolic rate is super low. But what I will say is, even though it's theoretically possible, it's very unlikely. The problem is most of us are very bad at tracking. In fact, we are not only bad at reporting our calorie intake, but also bad at reporting our calorie expenditure. So we tend to think we eat less and burn more than we do. So there's been several studies on this. Basically putting people in a lab, or at least getting people to track and really stay on top of them for who says they're at the 1,200 calorie mark but can't lose weight, ends up being their calorie intake can be double, even triple that, and the amount of calories they're burning off is way less than they think. So if you feel like you're at a super low calorie and you can't lose weight, it is possible, but you need to ask yourself first, have you been doing any sort of really aggressive dieting? And when I say aggressive, I mean to the point where you lose weight really quick, your mood's gonna suffer, you're gonna notice some psychological effects of this weight loss, and for a long period of time. So if that's you, then you might be at that point where your metabolism is slowed down. The good news is you can reverse that. Like I said, your metabolism is adaptive. So what you need to do in this context, it seems counterintuitive, but you actually want to gradually increase your calorie intake. So you eat more. You want to do this slowly, you want to do this gradually. And you're not going to gain as much weight as you think. And if you do it for a long enough point, you're going to get to a point where your metabolism gets back up at that higher level, where if you're ready to once again cut those calories and drop the weight at a sustainable rate, you'll be able to do so. But that's what we call reverse dieting, and that only happens if you've been cutting calories for a very long time and your metabolism has slowed down. There's no such thing as a broken metabolism. If you feel like you might be bad at tracking, just try to be really honest with your intake, because like I said, it's not a call out against anyone else. Even dietitians, nutritionists, personal trainers, we're all guilty of honestly underreporting our calorie intake. So to answer the question, does eating less cause you to gain weight? No. But it's complicated, and doing so for a long period of time will lower your metabolic rate, making it more challenging to lose weight in the future. Hope this video helped, and I will see you guys in the next one.